So it was the first day of spring in 2021. And I remember this day particularly was colder than it had been all winter long. I remember standing out in front of my apartment, smoking a joint, waiting for my boss to pick me up for work that morning. The wind sliced through every layer of clothing that I was wearing like a samurai sword. The weatherman had called for a nor'easter. He said about 8 to 12 inches of snow to be expected in the city of Boston. And since I plowed snow, I welcomed it with open arms. But by the time I got to my machine, the snow had already accumulated and was already sticking to the ground. As we started our routes, it didn't take long to notice that the snow was coming down faster than we could keep up with it. And before too long, it was total whiteout conditions. Sooner or later, not too long after that, we started losing radio transmission. And I remember nothing, not even CB radios, AM, FM, anything. It was total radio silence. I tried to call my wife, who was at home with our newborn daughter, to make sure she was okay, and there was no cell signal either. As I tried to continue passing through my route, it got to the point where it was unpassable. Snow was piling up along the building storefronts, and I had to make the decision right then and there to go home and make sure my family was safe. I drive my loader back to my house, and when I get there, it was buried in snow. I couldn't see, the doors were covered. I couldn't see in the windows. And the only thing I could do or think to do was to take my loader and drive it through the front of the house, in hopes that I could get in and pull my wife and daughter out. I ripped through the front of that house like nothing. I remember the crunching sound of the frame of the house as it buckled on top of the bucket of that machine. And I jumped out and jumped into the house, and remember searching for them frantically, through the rooms of the house. I found my wife and daughter curled up in a corner in a bedroom where the window had broken and snow had already been able to had started to fall through. I picked them up and put them in the loader with me, and I began to find a way and head west. Upon heading west for about 20 minutes, I realized I was where I thought the highway was, and it was nowhere to be seen. Um, there was probably about 20 feet of snow on the ground, and in some spots even more. The only thing I could think to do was to dig a tunnel, and that's what I did. I began digging a tunnel where I thought the Mass Pike was, and as I followed the dashboard compass that I picked up in a gas station the day before, I followed it west until the machine ran out of gas. As the machine ran out of fuel, I thought that it was the end, and that was my time. Until I saw in the banking of my tunnel, an MBTA bus that had been stuck, and I was able to siphon some fuel out of that and put it into my machine. That amount of fuel lasted me another few hours until the machine again sputtered and came to a halt. Um, and at that point, I started to seal my fate and accept the fact that that's where I was going to die. I prayed, I kissed my wife and my daughter, and with one last hope and prayer, I turned the key, and with what fuel was left in it, it sputtered up enough to get the arms raised up, all the way to the max one last time. And at that point, I saw sunlight break through the top of my tunnel. I grabbed my wife and my daughter, and I drug them out of the machine and through the hole through the top, where we saw miles of cars, emergency personnel and first responders, and local traffic as well, just stopped because of the abomination of snow that was in behind us and that we just protruded out of. As we rode away in the ambulance, I remember the feeling of a new beginning as we looked back at what used to be New England, but now looked like just a polar ice cap.